I stood alone in front of the large glass window of my office, on the top floor of the Kingsley Corporation headquarters in Utah. Now at 28 years old, I was the Regional Project Development Director, a position I once thought existed only in the most distant of dreams. The neon lights from the city below twinkled like lost stars. But what truly drew my gaze was the enormous Christmas tree in the square. It had just been lit up, thousands of sparkling bulbs shining like a dazzling reminder of the holiday season. My heart suddenly tightened, as though an invisible cord were squeezing it. Memories I had tried so hard to bury deep inside for years surged up uncontrollably, fierce and unstoppable. They dragged me back through time to that deadly Christmas when I was 20 years old, in the old house on the outskirts of Denver. I remember the feeling as clearly as if it were yesterday. Back then I was still Mark Miller, a name I hated with a burning passion but hadn't yet dared to discard. That suburban house was no luxurious villa. It was just an ordinary two-story home with a front yard full of patchy weeds and a wooden fence rotting away with age. Yet on that Christmas night, the living room was decorated so lavishly that it left me stunned. A towering Christmas tree reached the ceiling, adorned with glittering ornaments and strands of lights coiled around it like glowing serpents. The long dining table was set extravagantly, snow-white tablecloth, steaming platters of food, roast turkey, pudding, vegetable salad, and glasses of deep red wine gleaming under the light. The scent of cinnamon and fresh pine filled the air, mingling with Christmas music playing from the old radio in the corner. To any outsider, it would have looked like a warm family gathering overflowing with love. But to me, the atmosphere was suffocatingly cold, as though a thin layer of ice had encased my heart. Relatives filled both sides of the table, their laughter and chatter echoing loudly. There were aunts and uncles who had come from far away, cousins I only saw a few times a year, and close neighbors. They talked happily about work, their children, and plans for the new year. Everyone's eyes lit up when they spoke of gifts and the good things awaiting them. I sat at the corner of the table, my back straight as a wooden post, but beneath the table my hands were clenched so tightly that my nails dug into my palms. That familiar sense of isolation enveloped me like an undertow, sweeping away any trace of hope. I was used to being pushed to the sidelines on occasions like this, but tonight something felt different. The air seemed heavier, as if everyone were waiting for a play to begin, and I was the unwilling protagonist. My father, or rather the man I had called father for the past 20 years, Grant Miller, then 54 years old, owned a small construction contracting company. He was hot-tempered, authoritarian, and let money blind him to all moral boundaries. His face was flushed red from alcohol, his thinning gray hair carefully combed, and his black suit made him look every bit the boss he believed himself to be. He was going around giving gifts to each person, wearing a wide but calculated smile. Every large gift box was handed over with hollow words of blessing, and everyone's eyes shone with eager anticipation. My aunts and uncles received expensive gifts: a watch for Uncle John, a pearl necklace for Aunt Mary, and thick envelopes stuffed with cash for my cousins. Applause broke out each time a gift was opened, and the atmosphere grew even more lively. I sat there trying to keep my face calm, but inside me a storm was raging. I knew exactly where I stood in this family, an unnecessary extra, a faint shadow. I had been treated that way since childhood, but tonight an indistinct anxiety made my heart pound. Would he even remember me? Or would I once again be overlooked, just like every year before? I clenched my fists tighter, trying to suppress the trembling rising from deep within. Then it was my turn. The entire room suddenly fell silent, as if someone had turned off all sound. Every pair of eyes turned toward me, curious, pitying, contemptuous. My heart raced wildly, blood rushing to my ears with a deafening roar. Grant paused, looked at me with a twisted smile, then slowly pulled a single bill from his jacket pocket. Not a big gift box like everyone else's, but just one crumpled old $1 bill. He flung it straight at my face. The paper sliced through the air and slapped my cheek before falling onto the table. The pain wasn't from the impact itself, but from the naked humiliation. My cheek burned as if I had been slapped hard. $1. That's all you're worth in this house, you bloodless bastard. Grant declared in front of the entire family, his voice ringing out like a death sentence. "From this day forward, I sever all father-son ties with you. Never call me your father again. You're not worthy." Those words stabbed straight into my heart like a knife. The room went dead silent, the Christmas music continuing absurdly in the background. I sat frozen, my ears ringing from the torrent of insults. I had long known the truth, that I was not of Miller blood, but this pain, this public humiliation I would never forget. It was a wound that would bleed forever, never healing. My stepmother, Susan Miller, let out a scornful laugh that cut through the air like a blade. With her curled hair and garish red dress, she looked at me with eyes full of contempt. "You've just been a useless parasite living off others all these years," she spat, her voice shrill and venomous. "Keeping you in this house was already the greatest mercy I ever showed. Now get out. Don't dirty our Christmas atmosphere any longer." My heart pounded even more chaotically, my throat so tight I couldn't utter a single word. I wanted to scream, to fight back, but my body felt paralyzed. My younger stepbrother, Lucas Miller, 5 years my junior, laughed loudly with delight, each burst hammering into my skull. With his round face and brand new clothes, he mocked, "Look at yourself, brother. Your pockets are completely empty. How are you going to survive out there? But whether you live or die, it's no longer any concern of this family." None of the relatives tried to stop it. Not one person stood up for me. Some even joined in the laughter as if this were a hilarious party joke. Others looked at me with pity mixed with disdain, the way one might look at a stray dog being chased from the house. There I sat, in the middle of that lavish feast, feeling smaller and more alone than ever before. My cheeks still burned from the dollar bill, my ears ringing with their jeers. My heart beat wildly, each thud heavy against my chest as if trying to crush my breath. My throat was choked, I couldn't speak. I had known I wasn't truly a Miller, had told myself to be ready. But when the humiliation crashed down in front of everyone, the pain still pierced my heart. Some wounds, no matter how long you prepare for them, hurt just as much as the first time they cut. I understood that from this moment onward, this feeling would follow me for the rest of my life, impossible to erase from memory. In that instant, I clearly understood that they didn't just want to kick me out of the house. They wanted to crush the last shred of my dignity first. They wanted me to leave with a broken heart and a trampled soul, so that I could never again hold my head high. After Grant's humiliating words, Susan's scornful laughter, and Lucas's venomous taunt, the living room, ablaze with Christmas lights, suddenly plunged into a heavy, suffocating silence. The banquet table remained lavishly spread, the tree still glittered, and the relatives sat frozen around it, not a single soul speaking up in my defense. Amid that festive atmosphere, I stood utterly alone, fully aware that in this house I had no one. Yet in that moment, a strange power surged up from the deepest part of me. It wasn't blind rage. It was cold, crystalline clarity forged from years of silent endurance. I stopped trembling. On the contrary, my body felt steadier than it ever had. I lifted my head, looked Grant straight in the eye, and smiled. A calm, defiant smile. I spoke evenly without the slightest quiver in my voice. "Fine. From now on, I won't call you father either." The entire room fell dead silent. My smile struck him like a slap in return. Grant blinked, his alcohol-flushed face draining of color. Susan's laughter died in her throat, her mouth hanging open. Lucas stared at me as if I'd turned into a monster. The relatives began whispering, their eyes darting between Grant and me, waiting for the explosion. I rose slowly, deliberately, making the air even heavier. From my coat pocket, I pulled out a thick, yellowed envelope. I placed it on the table in front of Grant, right beside the crumpled $1 bill still lying there. My demeanor was calm but unyielding, a silent declaration of war. Grant stared at the envelope, momentarily stunned, then reached for it. His hand trembled slightly, though he tried to hide it. Inside was my real mother's letter. Rose, the mother who died when I was very young. The handwriting was soft and familiar, a letter I had read hundreds of times on lonely nights. Beside it were all the receipts. fragile sheets of paper that carried ironclad proof that Grant had embezzled the monthly allowance sent by my biological father for years. Receipts for withdrawals bearing my mother's signature before her death, then Grant's afterward. Every sheet clearly listed the date, the amount, and the supposed purpose, none of which had ever reached me. Instead, the money had funded the Millers' lavish lifestyle. I stood there watching Grant flip through page after page. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from the thrill of waiting for the truth to detonate. Grant shot to his feet, stumbling back toward the window, clutching the letter and receipts. He skimmed them, then read more carefully, his face turning as white as the paper. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the freezing winter night and the howling snow outside. Susan and Lucas sensed something terribly wrong. Susan stood up abruptly, her voice shrill. "Grant, what's going on? Why do you look like that?" Lucas glared at me in confusion, his earlier smug grin gone. Grant tried to stay composed, but his hands shook, the papers rustling loudly. "What? What is this? How did you get these?" he stammered, voice hoarse. But I knew he understood perfectly. Everything was collapsing right in front of him. At that exact moment, a loud roar came from the front yard, engines growling, then cutting off. A convoy of gleaming black SUVs pulled up in perfect unison, their headlights sweeping across the snow-covered lawn. The house erupted into chaos. Relatives jumped up, crowding the windows, murmuring, "What's happening? Why are all these cars at our house?" Grant looked outside and turned deathly pale, his body shaking as if he might collapse. He knew. He had to know. Those vehicles weren't random. They were the mark of a far greater power, a storm he had tried to hide for years. 3 firm, authoritative knocks sounded at the door. The entire room froze in curiosity and fear. The air turned to ice. Only the absurd Christmas music kept playing from the radio. Every eye turned toward the entrance. I walked to the door, gripping the handle tightly, my heart hammering in my chest. This was the moment I had planned and waited for over the past 2 years. I opened the door. The first man to step inside carried such dignity and authority that the whole room held its breath. Tall, silver-haired yet sharp-featured, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit. He paused gently in front of me, swept a cold, commanding gaze across the room, then placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. A hand that instantly filled me with strength I had never known. It was Robert Kingsley, my biological father, the billionaire head of the Kingsley Corporation, lord of a vast empire of tourism and resorts. Strength flowed from that hand through my entire body. I turned back to face Grant, my voice now ringing clear and unbroken. "Why did you steal the money my mother left for me? Why did you treat me cruelly for years? Beating me, starving me, treating me like a beggar. And today, why did you humiliate me in front of everyone like this?" My words cut through the silence like knives. The relatives' whispers grew louder, eyes shifting frantically. Grant's face turned purple with rage. He slammed the table and roared, "You're making this up. All lies to ruin my reputation. I raised you for years and now you dare slander me like this." Susan immediately jumped in, shrieking, "You ungrateful bastard! After everything I gave you. Food, a roof. This is how you repay us." Lucas bellowed in fury, his face crimson. "You're not worthy of the Miller name. Get out, you piece of trash." I stayed silent for a few seconds, letting their words hang in the air, then spoke with calm, razor-sharp finality. "From this day forward, I no longer carry the name Miller. I am a Kingsley, because I have found my real father, and he is the man standing behind me, billionaire Robert Kingsley." My words fell like a bomb. The room went dead silent, the air freezing for several breathless seconds. Grant trembled violently. The stack of receipts slipped from his limp hands and scattered across the floor with a dry rustle. Several relatives picked them up, skimmed them, then looked up in horror at Grant's family. The truth was laid bare in the middle of that Christmas feast, stripping away every ugly layer of pretense. Whispers turned to open murmurs, spreading like wildfire. So that's how it was, poor Mark. Grant and Susan tried desperately to explain, their voices cracking. No, it's not like that. It's a misunderstanding. But no one believed them anymore. The relatives' eyes were now filled with contempt and disappointment. Robert stood silently, yet his mere presence was an impenetrable wall that rendered every excuse meaningless. I no longer cared about their stares. I had seen the true face of the family that raised me for 20 years. The hypocrisy, the greed, the cruelty. I turned my back and walked out of that house in silence, side by side with Robert, stepping through the door without once looking back. That humiliating Christmas night officially ended, but for me it marked the beginning of a new chapter. The snowy wind whipped my face, yet I felt no cold. Walking beside my real father, for the first time in my life, I felt truly warm. On the drive, inside the gleaming black lead SUV, Robert sat beside me, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder like a silent encouragement. The snow-covered highway stretched out white and endless, the headlights cut through swirling flakes that danced like ghosts in the night. He broke the silence first, his voice deep, warm, and brimming with pride. My son, I am so incredibly proud of you. You've risen above unimaginable hardship to become the strong, resilient man you are today. Not many could have done that. His words made my heart tremble. In all those years, I had never once heard genuine praise like this. I turned to him and smiled softly. Thank you, Dad. Thank you for being there tonight, for giving me the strength. Without you, I don't know how I would have faced them. Robert nodded, his eyes glistening under the passing streetlights, as if he were holding back emotions that had been pent up for decades. As the car glided smoothly along the long road, my memories slipped even deeper past that cruel Christmas night and back into the distant days of my childhood. They rushed in like a flood, sweeping everything away, forcing me to lean my forehead against the cold window and stare into the pitch-black darkness outside. I was 6 years old, too young to fully grasp the meaning of life and death. My mother, Rose Miller, fell gravely ill. She had cancer, a monstrous disease I only understood as Mom is tired, so she has to stay in the hospital. I remember how the suburban house in Denver turned gloomy. The smell of disinfectant drifted from her room. She lay in bed, her face gaunt, her once shiny long hair almost completely gone. I often sat beside her bed holding her hand and asking, "Mom, when will you be better so we can play again?" She would give me a faint smile and stroke my hair. "Wait just a little longer, sweetheart. Mom will try to get better for you." But she never got better. She left us on an autumn morning when golden leaves covered the yard. I stood beside her coffin without crying because I didn't yet understand what death was. I only knew that from now on Mom wouldn't hold me when I slept. After her death, my father, Grant, began to change day by day. The man who used to laugh easily and ask about school and friends grew quiet, harsh, and withdrawn. He used to lift me onto his shoulders and roar with laughter when I told him stories from kindergarten. But after the funeral, he became a shadow. Meals turned suffocatingly silent. We sat across from each other at the small kitchen table, the only sound the clink of spoons against plates. The way Grant looked at me was no longer warm, it was weary and cold, as if I were a burden reminding him of his loss. I tried to break the silence. Today I drew a picture at school and the teacher said it was really good, Dad. He would only grunt without looking up. Gradually I learned to stay quiet too, swallowing my stories and feeling like an outsider in my own home. Just 1 year later, Grant remarried. Susan entered our lives with a saccharine smile, curled hair, and bright floral dresses. But her eyes were always icy when they landed on me, as though I were an obstacle to her happiness. From the very first days, I knew I was unwelcome. Every move I made was scrutinized. If I spilled a glass of water, she would snap, "Why are you so clumsy? Don't dirty my house." Every mistake was magnified, as if I existed only to mess up. Grant slowly softened under Susan's sweet words and pampering. She would whisper in his ear, "Honey, that boy exhausts me. Why don't you discipline him more strictly?" and he began to see my presence as an annoyance. His hugs grew rare, replaced by glares. Then Lucas was born, and the last trace of my place in the family was officially erased. The new baby was cradled like a treasure. Every eye turned to him. I remember the day Lucas was born. The house buzzed with excitement. Relatives came with congratulations and piles of gifts. I stood in the corner of the hospital room watching the red-faced infant in Susan's arms, feeling a strange, piercing loneliness. "This is our real son," Grant said proudly, completely forgetting I was there. From then on, Lucas grew up sheltered and spoiled. He got everything new. Clothes, toys, bicycles, the very best. If Lucas broke something, Grant just laughed it off. Meanwhile, as I grew older, I was given every chore in the house, sweeping dusty floors, washing filthy laundry, cooking daily meals. Lucas never had to lift a finger. I was constantly compared to Lucas in everything. No matter how well I did at school, topping math class or winning first prize in art contests, I never heard a word of praise. Good grades? So what? Anyone can do that, Susan would sneer. Even when I won medals in sports, track or soccer, no one in the family ever came to watch or congratulate me. I would come home clutching a medal, bursting with excitement. "Dad, look what I brought home. A gold medal from the soccer tournament." Grant would glance at it once and go back to his work. All my efforts were taken for granted or dismissed as worthless. Praise was always reserved for Lucas. I gradually learned to swallow every grievance in silence, to choke back tears. Some nights I lay in bed, tears streaming down my face, but I didn't dare cry out loud for fear of being scolded. I told myself over and over, "You have to be strong, Mark. One day you'll get out of here." Day by day, I came to realize I was no longer a son in that house. I was just a lodger, a servant, a shadow living quietly under the same roof as people who called themselves my family. At meals, I sat at the corner and ate leftovers. During holidays, I stood outside watching them celebrate. When I was sick, no one cared. That pain built up inside me like a time bomb, waiting for the day it would finally explode. When I turned 18, everything still seemed to follow the same monotonous, icy routine. It was a late autumn afternoon in Denver. Golden leaves drifted lazily along the path from school to home. I left class as usual, my heavy backpack slung over one shoulder, stuffed with textbooks and half-formed dreams. My birthday was nothing special. No cake, no gifts, no congratulations from anyone at home. I had long grown used to being forgotten, so I simply walked out of the school gate in silence, head bowed, already dreading another endless evening of chores and homework. The sky was overcast and gray, a cold wind whipping at my face, forcing me to pull the collar of my old jacket higher. I never imagined that this day would change everything, like a real bomb exploding in my life. Just as I stepped through the gate, a middle-aged man in a worn suit approached me. He looked about 50 with thinning gray hair and a weathered face etched with deep lines around his eyes. His gaze was cautious yet serious, as though he were carefully weighing every word. I stopped, my heart beating a little faster from the surprise. "Excuse me, are you Mark Miller?" he asked, his voice low and polite. I nodded warily. "Yes, I'm Mark Miller. Who are you?" He introduced himself as Thomas Whitfield, my mother Rose Miller's lawyer. The mention of my mother's name stunned me. She had died when I was 6, and hardly anyone ever spoke of her anymore. "I need to speak with you privately about something concerning Rose," he said, lowering his voice as if afraid someone might overhear. Shock, suspicion, and curiosity collided violently inside my chest. Who was this man? Why had he come looking for me on my birthday of all days? Was this some kind of prank? After a few seconds of hesitation, I decided to follow him. Part of me was curious, the other part figured I had nothing left to lose. Thomas led me to a small cafe near the school, the one where I often sat alone on rainy afternoons. The place was cramped, filled with the strong scent of roasted coffee and the soft hum of old jazz from the speakers. We chose a secluded table in the corner, away from the curious glances of other students. Once seated, Thomas placed a time-yellowed envelope in front of me. The paper was faded and slightly crumpled. "This is the letter your mother instructed me to give you," he said gravely. "She was very clear. It was to be handed to you in person only on your 18th birthday. I have kept it safe for the past 12 years. My heart pounded as my trembling fingers brushed the envelope. Thomas explained briefly. He had been my mother's personal attorney, helping her draft her will and handle certain private matters before she passed. "She trusted me, and now I am fulfilling my promise," he said. Then he stood, wished me luck, and left. I sat there for a while, staring at the envelope as though it were a ticking bomb. I didn't open it right away. I was afraid, terrified that whatever truth lay inside would shatter the few remnants of the world I knew. When I finally left the cafe, I carried the envelope in my backpack, my mind a raging storm. The walk home felt longer than ever, each step heavier than the last. I kept the whole thing secret. No one in the family knew. Grant and Susan were busy with work. Lucas was out fooling around with friends. I had no intention of sharing it. I knew they would either mock me or fly into a rage. That night, there was no birthday wish, no sign that anyone remembered it was my day. Dinner was as cold and silent as always. Grant at the head of the table, Susan and Lucas chattering excitedly about weekend plans while I sat in the corner eating leftovers. Their lively conversation revolved only around themselves. Lucas passing an exam, Susan's shopping spree, Grant's new contract. I had grown so accustomed to being invisible that I simply finished my meal in silence and slipped away to my room, my only refuge, a tiny cramped space with an old bed and a cluttered desk. I locked the door, sat on the bed, heart racing. My hands shook as I pulled the envelope from my backpack. From the living room, their laughter still echoed, a cruel reminder of my isolation. I took a deep breath and tore it open. Inside was a letter in my mother's gentle handwriting, along with an old photograph of a young, unfamiliar man, sharp-featured with jet-black hair and a confident smile. I began to read. Each line cut like a blade. In the letter, Rose confessed a truth that had been hidden my entire life. I was not Grant Miller's biological son, the man I had called father for over a decade. The words struck me like lightning. She explained, years ago she had been a maid for the Kingsley family, one of the wealthiest and most powerful dynasties in the tourism and resort industry. She worked at their main estate in Utah, surrounded by luxurious resorts. While employed there, Rose and the young heir, Robert Kingsley, fell in love in secret. She described him as ambitious and kind, but bound by family duty. They met in hidden moments, late afternoons by the lake on the estate grounds, whispering love between her working hours. But when she became pregnant with me, the Kingsley family discovered the affair. Robert's parents, powerful figures with a vast business empire, intervened immediately. Using money, threats, and lawyers, they severed everything. She was fired, all contact was forbidden, and she was banished from ever returning or reaching Robert. "They called you a stain, a mistake," she wrote, her handwriting trembling. In exchange, the Kingsleys agreed to send Rose a monthly allowance to raise the child, me. That was their way of resolving the scandal and protecting the family's reputation. My mother left quietly, carrying her unborn child and a secret she could never reveal. She wrote of her lonely journey to Denver, marrying Grant, a kind but ordinary man she met by chance, hoping he would love me as his own. But life had not turned out that way. At the end of the letter, Rose begged my forgiveness for letting me grow up in the shadow of the truth. "I love you, Mark. I never wanted you to suffer, but I had no other choice. This photograph is of your father, Robert Kingsley. Find him if you ever need help. He is a good man, only trapped by his family." Each word hammered into my mind. My breathing grew labored, my chest tight as though squeezed by an iron band. The letter slipped from my shaking hands and fell to the floor. Suddenly, every childhood memory, my mother's death, the family's coldness, it all fell into place with chilling clarity. The weary way Grant used to look at me. Now I understood he had always known I wasn't his. Susan's constant scorn, she hated me because I was a living reminder of the past. Lucas's pampering, he was the real blood son. Everything formed a horrifying, perfectly cruel picture. I sat frozen in my room, eyes blankly fixed on my mother's final words. In one birthday evening, the world I knew collapsed entirely. The man I had called father for over a decade was suddenly a complete stranger. And I, in that moment, no longer knew who I was or where I belonged. Was I still Mark Miller, or the son of a distant billionaire? I sat there for hours, tears streaming silently down my face, my mind spinning with questions that had no answers. After the night I read that letter, I lived in a prolonged state of bewilderment, as if my entire body were submerged in thick, impenetrable fog. Every memory of Grant's cruelty came rushing back relentlessly, refusing to give me even a moment of peace. A smoldering anger began to rise inside me like a tiny flame that never stopped spreading, burning through every thought. I wanted to scream, to storm into the living room and confront Grant right then and there. You knew everything, didn't you? You've been lying to me all these years. But I chose silence. I showed no sign of anything unusual. I knew that if I exploded now, everything would shatter, and I wasn't ready. I needed time to process, to plan. So I continued living in that house as though I had never uncovered that earth-shattering secret. Every day I still woke at 5 a.m., swept the dusty floors, did the laundry, cooked breakfast for the whole family, then hurriedly biked to school. I still bowed my head when Grant barked, "Move faster, you lazy good-for-nothing." I stayed quiet when Susan sneered, "You're so useless. How will you ever survive out there?" I watched Lucas play with his new toys without letting jealousy show on my face. On the outside, I was calm as a machine. Forced smiles when necessary, monotone replies when spoken to. But inside, my mind spun endlessly around my mother's letter and the photograph of that stranger. I hid them under my pillow, and every night when the house fell silent, I took them out and stared. Robert Kingsley's face in the photo, young, confident, made me wonder, does he look like me? Does he remember Mom? Does he even know I exist? Those questions haunted me. My sleep became restless, filled with nightmares. Time passed in that quiet torment day after day like a slow but relentless river. I forced myself to focus on studying, knowing it was my only way out. I spent hours in the school library, not just doing homework, but secretly looking up anything I could about the Kingsley family. Back then, though, I didn't dare dig too deep. I was afraid the truth would be too immense, that it would swallow me whole. Then came the day the university results were announced. I was accepted into a college in Denver, not the most prestigious, but one I could afford with scholarships and part-time jobs. It was the reward for countless sleepless nights studying under a weak desk lamp. I came home clutching the acceptance letter, hoping for even a single word of praise. Grant only glanced at it. "So you got in? Good. Now take care of yourself." Susan smirked. "Don't think you're special. Once you're on your own, you'll see how tough it is." I swallowed the bitterness, but inside I was secretly overjoyed. This was my chance to leave. I asked permission to move out for the sake of my studies. Grant and Susan didn't try to stop me, they even looked relieved. They coldly declared that from now on I had to fend for myself completely. No more financial support, no help of any kind. "You're grown now. Handle your own life," Grant said without a trace of affection. Susan added, "And don't come crawling back for money." My departure was quiet. No send-off, no well wishes. One late summer morning, I packed my few belongings, a handful of old clothes, my books, and my mother's letter, into a cheap suitcase, then rode my bike away from that suburban house in Denver. No hugs, no goodbyes. I looked back at the house one last time. My heart tightened, but I felt no regret. That was where I had grown up, but it had never been my home. I moved into a tiny rented room near campus, cramped with moldy walls, a creaky iron bed, and a mini gas stove. I began a completely independent life, working part-time at a cafe to pay rent, buying the cheapest food, studying late into the night. For the first time, I tasted freedom. Freedom to breathe, to think, to act without being watched and judged. With that first taste of freedom, I finally decided to investigate what was written in the letter. No longer sneaking around, I spent hours in the university library and nearby internet cafes. Using the name Kingsley, I searched business records and news archives online. I typed, Kingsley family, Robert Kingsley, Kingsley Tourism Corporation. The results flooded in like a tidal wave. Articles about their colossal hotel and resort empire, luxury properties in Utah, chains across Europe and Asia, billions in annual revenue, glamorous real estate projects. I saw photos of Robert, now a billionaire, on the covers of business magazines, his confident smile identical to the one in the old photograph. I began to grasp the sheer scale of it all. Not just wealth, but real power, with connections everywhere. The contrast between our impoverished life, Mom and I scraping by on meager meals, clothes patched over and over, and the Kingsley's opulence made my blood run cold. Sitting in front of the computer screen, hands trembling, I thought, how did Mom survive that? Why did she have to suffer so much? I remembered my own deprived childhood. Christmases without gifts, forgotten birthdays, times I was sick and had to buy medicine myself because there was no money for a doctor, and I wondered, if that monthly allowance really existed, where had it gone? Mom's letter mentioned regular payments from the Kingsleys to raise me, yet I had never seen a single cent. Had Grant known and kept it all? The thought kept me awake at night. I began piecing together the smallest clues from the old house. Papers I'd glimpsed when sneaking looks at Grant's documents. Strange receipts he hid carefully. Now that I was out, I needed a real plan. One day I called home with a made-up excuse about retrieving some old books, just to stay in contact. Grant grumbled, "Yeah, fine. Come tomorrow. Susan and I will be out all day for some meeting." I hung up, heart pounding. This was a rare opportunity. I took half a day off from the cafe, claiming I was sick. I biked back to the old house in broad daylight, the sun blazing yet the autumn wind still sharp. My heart raced as I arrived, the same rotting wooden fence, the patchy lawn. I checked that no one was home, then slipped through the back gate using the spare key I'd hidden years ago under a flower pot. I crept into Grant's study, a room he always kept locked, but today it was carelessly left ajar. My heart felt like it would leap out of my chest. My palms were slick with sweat. I opened the bedside drawer where he kept important papers and found a thick stack of monthly bank withdrawal receipts, along with the power of attorney document my mother had signed before she died. I flipped through them, breathing hard. The receipts before Mom's death bore her name and signature. Regular transfers of about $2,000 each month. But after she passed, the name changed to Grant. His scrawled signature, the dates lining up perfectly with the years I grew up in poverty. I photographed everything with my cheap phone, hands shaking so badly I had to retake several shots. Then I slipped out of the house and biked back to my room, mind reeling. That night, back in my tiny rented room, I spread everything out on the small wooden table under the flickering neon light. I took notes, cross-referencing every date. And the truth emerged. The withdrawals matched the exact times Grant bought a shiny new Ford when I was 8, replaced the living room furniture with expensive pieces, bought Susan glittering gold jewelry she loved to show off, and paid for Lucas's private school, fancy toys, and family vacations I was never included in. Sitting there, surrounded by those papers, rage pounded in my chest. I finally understood. After Mom died, Grant had stolen every single dollar meant for me and spent it on his new family. Not once using it for my books, clothes, or future. He had robbed me of my childhood, turned me into a servant while living off money that was rightfully mine. In that cramped room, amid the receipts scattered across the table, I finally saw clearly who my real enemy was. Grant wasn't just a cold stepfather, he was a liar, a thief. And for the first time in my life, I made a firm decision. I would find the man in the photograph, my real father. Not to beg for money, but to demand justice and to discover where I truly belonged. After all those discoveries, I no longer had any doubt about my true identity. I was Robert Kingsley's son, not Grant Miller's. Yet another fear began to creep in, stealthy and smoldering like a shadow. What if my biological father refused to acknowledge me? What if history repeated itself exactly as it had with my mother? She had been banished from the family, cut off completely. Would I, the child born of a mistake, now be pushed to the margins once again? That thought kept me hesitating, lying awake on the creaking iron bed, staring at the mold-stained ceiling. I imagined Robert looking at me with cold eyes and saying, "Who are you? I don't know you." Or worse, he would deny everything and have security drag me away like a fraud. The fear wasn't physical pain, it was the terror of final rejection, the dread that I truly belonged nowhere. I found contact details on the corporation's website, media relations, human resources, even the executive office. I wrote more detailed emails, attaching a scan of the old photograph and a few lines from my mother's letter. "I am the son of Rose Miller. I need to meet Mr. Robert Kingsley to clarify the truth." I sent them late at night when the rented room was silent except for the patter of rain on the tin roof. But every message vanished into silence. No replies, no calls. My inbox stayed empty as if the words I'd written had never existed. Disappointment piled up and I began to wonder, does he simply not want to know? Or is someone blocking me? Around that time I started feeling watched. At first it was just a vague sensation. Strange glances from passers-by, a car parked longer than usual in the alley. Then, on late shifts leaving the cafe, I noticed a stranger standing at the entrance to my alley. A tall man in a black coat smoking under a street lamp, eyes furtively scanning toward me. The first time I thought it was imagination. The second and third times I was certain. My heart raced faster on the way home. I walked quickly, glancing over my shoulder. Who was following me? The Kingsley Corporation? I double-locked my door, drew the curtains tight, yet sleep remained restless. That fear made everything more tense, like I was playing a dangerous game of chess against an opponent hidden in the dark. Then one morning, as I opened the door to head to class, a plain white envelope lay wedged under it. No sender, no stamp, no address. My hands shook as I picked it up. It felt like holding a live grenade. Inside was a single small slip of paper typed in cold letters. "Bury the past and live quietly. Otherwise you will disappear." The threat hit me like a punch in the face. I realized my search for the Kingsley family had been discovered. Someone inside the organization had intercepted my emails and wanted the truth silenced forever. I thought of Robert. Did he know? Or was this the work of others in the family? Fear surged, tempting me to stop, to forget everything and live a normal life. But then I looked at the photograph my mother left, at her eyes full of hope. No, I couldn't. I also understood clearly, if I gave up now, I would spend the rest of my life as a shadow, without roots, without justice. I would keep slaving away while Grant and his family lived comfortably off my money while I struggled in a moldy room. No, I had to see this through to the end. I decided to rent a car and set off immediately. I saved every extra cent from work, rented an old beat-up car from a garage near campus, and stuffed a few changes of clothes and all the evidence into a suitcase. Destination: Salt Lake City, Utah. Headquarters of the Kingsley Corporation. A journey of over 500 miles across desolate highways and towering mountains. I drove through the night, heart pounding at every road sign. Am I being reckless? I asked myself, but I didn't turn back. When dawn broke and Salt Lake City appeared, skyscrapers glinting in the morning sun, I felt a strange surge of strength, the power of truth. When I stepped into the corporation's headquarters, a towering modern glass tower in the city center, my heart pounded like war drums. The lobby was vast, polished marble floors, uniformed staff coming and going. I walked up to the reception desk, clutching the envelope of evidence, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need to see Mr. Robert Kingsley. It's a very important personal matter." But before I could explain further, security stopped me. Two large men in black suits stepped forward. "Sorry, sir, you don't have an appointment. Please leave." I tried again. "I'm his son. I have proof." They just shook their heads and placed hands on my shoulders. At that moment, a middle-aged woman emerged from the elevator, followed by a young man. She was tall, platinum blonde hair in a severe bun, wearing an expensive suit. Catherine Kingsley, Robert's wife. Beside her was Finley Kingsley, their legitimate son. His face resembled Robert's but was filled with arrogance. Catherine's eyes turned ice-cold the instant she saw me, as if I were something filthy dragged in from the street. She approached and immediately unleashed a torrent of insults about my mother's origins, her shrill voice echoing through the lobby. "Who are you? The son of that maid Rose Miller. That old affair is a stain on this family." I stood frozen, blood rushing to my face. She publicly humiliated me, declaring I was nothing but the shameful result of a mistake and had no right to set foot here. "You think you deserve to meet him? A penniless nobody from Denver dreaming of a better life?" Finley laughed scornfully, mocking me as an imposter, a poor wretch chasing delusions of grandeur. He sneered that even if I knelt here all day, I would never be part of the Kingsley family. Their venom poured down on me in the middle of the crowded lobby. Staff paused to stare, visitors whispered. Catherine shrieked, "Get out, you bastard! This is no place for you." Then she coldly ordered security to drag me out like a troublemaker. They grabbed my arms and shoved me toward the doors. Before I was thrown out, they openly threatened, "If you show up again, you won't just disappear legally, you'll disappear for good." Those words cut like knives, chilling me to the bone. I was pushed backward under the indifferent gazes of staff and guests. In that moment, I understood. Catherine and Finley were the ones behind all the surveillance and threats, trying to silence me forever. They had known about me from the emails and wanted me erased, just as they had erased my mother. Just as the heavy glass doors were about to close in my face, a deep, commanding voice rang out from inside the lobby. "Stop! Let him go!" Those footsteps made every security guard freeze. Their hands dropped from my arms. Catherine and Finley both turned deathly pale in unison. The man who appeared was Robert Kingsley. Tall, silver-haired, sharp-featured, exactly like the photograph. He walked forward, his eyes sweeping over me, and time seemed to stand still. My heart pounded wildly. This was my father, and he was right here. I stood frozen as the man appeared in the lobby. Every line on his face matched almost perfectly the person in the photograph my mother had left behind. The only difference was the commanding icy aura he carried, like a king stepping out of a palace of glass. I had stared at that picture hundreds of times in my cramped rented room under the flickering neon light, wondering what kind of man he was. Now he stood right in front of me, real enough to touch. The air in the lobby suddenly grew heavy, as though everyone were holding their breath, waiting for an explosion. Staff paused mid-task. Visitors froze in place, and Catherine stammered, "Robert, what are you doing?" But he didn't even glance at her. His eyes were fixed solely on me. In that instant, I knew without a doubt that this was my real father. There was no longer any room for uncertainty. The resemblance wasn't just physical. It was in the way he stood, solid and immovable like a mountain. I called out his name, my voice trembling yet resolute, echoing through the vast lobby. "Mr. Robert Kingsley. I am the son of Rose Miller." The moment her name left my lips, Robert froze. His gaze locked onto mine. His expression darkened as if a long-buried memory had suddenly been ripped to the surface. The atmosphere in the lobby became suffocatingly tense. Robert immediately signaled for all the security guards to stand down. His voice was short and absolute. "Let him go." Everyone stepped back. The guards hesitated for a second, then obeyed, retreating like shadows. He walked slowly toward me, eyes never leaving my face, studying every detail. Each footstep rang out on the marble floor, making my heart pound harder. He stopped just a few paces away and asked in a low, deliberate voice, "What did you just say? Son of Rose Miller?" I nodded, hands shaking as I held out the envelope containing the letter and Rose's photograph. This is my mother's letter. It has your picture inside." He took it. His fingers trembled slightly, just a small gesture, but it told me he was not made of stone. The instant Robert's eyes fell on the photograph and the familiar handwriting, his face changed completely. The stern, commanding mask softened. The hand holding the letter shook. His breathing slowed for several agonizing seconds. I watched him skim it, then read more carefully, his eyes misting with an emotion I had never expected to see in a man of such power. The entire lobby fell deathly silent, as if everyone were witnessing a tragic play. Catherine pushed forward, voice shrill. "Robert, don't believe that forged letter. He's a con artist." Finley shouted, "Dad, call the police. He's only here to extort money." But Robert cut them off coldly. "Take him to my office, now." Catherine and Finley immediately protested louder, insisting I was insane, a fraud. "He's making it all up. Some broke kid from nowhere dreaming of stealing our fortune." Catherine shrieked, her face flushed with rage. Finley cursed, "Dad, don't let him fool you. He's not your son." They kept demanding security. "Throw me out at once." Catherine pointed accusingly at my face. Finley tried to grab Robert's arm, but Robert didn't turn around, didn't answer them. He simply repeated his order, voice like ice. That absolute dismissal left Catherine and Finley stunned, speechless, mouths agape, eyes wide with shock and fear. They stood there like statues while the guards escorted me with Robert toward the private elevator. The elevator rose to the top floor in total silence. I could hear my own heartbeat. Robert stood beside me without speaking, but I felt the tension radiating from him. His shoulders were rigid, his breathing deeper. The doors opened onto a vast office. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking all of Salt Lake City. A gleaming wooden desk, luxurious leather chairs. He motioned for the guards to leave, then closed the door. The moment we were alone, the cold mask on Robert's face collapsed entirely. He strode straight to me and wrapped me in a fierce embrace. His breath hitched, his whole body trembled with emotion that had been suppressed for nearly 20 years. The hug was tight enough to crush the air from my lungs, yet it carried a warmth I had never known. Joy, regret, and pain all mingled in it. I felt it in the way he held me, as if terrified I might vanish. I stood rigid in the arms of the man who should have been my father long ago, my body stiff as stone. My heart hammered. I didn't know how to react. Inside me, everything shattered into two opposing halves. Overwhelming joy at finally seeing my father, and deep pain for the long years of loneliness and abuse he had never known about. For the first time in my life, I felt the arms of someone who shared my blood. Not Grant with his slaps, not Susan with her sneers, but my real father. The man my mother had loved and sacrificed everything for. Tears rolled down my cheeks, soaking into his suit jacket. He whispered, voice breaking, "My son, I'm so sorry." Those words broke the dam. I burst into sobs like a child. When the storm of emotion finally subsided, we sat facing each other across the desk. Robert wiped his eyes, voice still trembling. "Tell me about Rose. How is she now?" I took a deep breath and began telling him everything. How my mother fell ill, the agony she endured in the hospital, her death when I was only 6, the impoverished life we led in Denver. I told him about Grant, how he changed after Mom died, how he stole the allowance money, and the years I was treated like a slave. Endless chores, beatings, constant comparison to Lucas. I showed him the receipts detailing every dollar spent on new cars, jewelry, vacations. None of it ever for me. My voice shook as the memories flooded back. Nights I went hungry, the times I was called useless. Robert listened, his face growing pale. Fists clenched so tight the knuckles turned white. He broke down when he learned Rose had been gone for so long. Tears streamed down the face of this powerful billionaire, an image I never thought I'd see. He told me that after she disappeared, he had searched desperately, but every trace had been erased by his own parents, using lawyers and money to bury everything. "I thought she left because she hated me," he whispered, voice thick with regret. Then pain turned to fury when he heard how his son had been treated. His eyes blazed red, voice a low growl. Grant Miller, he dared do that to my son. I will destroy him. He stood, slamming a fist on the desk, face flushed with rage. I held him back, voice steady. Dad, don't. I want to face them myself one last time. That's how I close this chapter. Robert looked at me for a long moment. The anger in his eyes slowly gave way to admiration. He understood the meaning behind my choice. Back to when I was 20 years old, after that dramatic confrontation with Grant on Christmas night, I was sitting in the car with Robert. The convoy of gleaming black SUVs glided smoothly along the highway from Denver toward Utah, the snowy wind still whipping against the windows. The interior was quiet, broken only by the steady hum of the engine and our breathing. Robert sat beside me, his face still carrying traces of the emotion from the embrace at headquarters. He turned to me, voice low and warm. My son, come home with me to the estate. You can live there, work at the corporation. I'll make up for everything you've lost. The offer tightened my chest. A new life, luxurious with my real father by my side. But I shook my head, voice firm. Dad, thank you. But I want to stay in Denver and finish my studies. Everything has happened so fast, I need time to settle. Robert looked at me, a flash of sadness in his eyes. He ached to compensate immediately after all those lost years. He sighed. I understand. You've been strong on your own for so long. I respect your decision. He placed a hand on my shoulder, and we continued the journey in silence. Yet the bond between father and son had already begun to form. Robert declared he would immediately cut off every dollar Grant had ever stolen, the monthly allowance from the Kingsley family. I'll stop all transactions and sue that family in court, he said, voice full of resolve. I neither cheered nor objected. I simply accepted that from now on everything would be settled by law. No more emotional confrontations, only evidence, lawyers, and verdicts. In the days that followed, I returned to my student life in Denver, but everything was different. No more exhausting late shifts at the cafe, no more worrying about rent or meager meals. Robert quietly provided financial support, regular transfers, nothing flashy, but enough for me to focus entirely on my studies for the first time in my life. I sat in the university library, surrounded by books, no longer distracted by chores or money troubles. Classes became easier. Friends noticed the change. You look healthier, Mark. I smiled but said nothing. Inside, I waited anxiously for the summons to reach Grant for the trial. My father's lawyers swiftly gathered everything: bank receipts, my mother's power of attorney document, the full transaction history from the Kingsley estate. They worked fast, completed the paperwork, and officially filed the lawsuit against Grant and his family for years of embezzling a minor's support funds. The complaint was airtight, backed by ironclad proof. Every monthly withdrawal Grant made after Mom died, spent on personal luxuries instead of me. Summonses were delivered one after another to the Miller household. I could picture it. Grant opening the envelope and turning ashen, Susan panicking, Lucas stunned. They called me a few times, voices trembling. Mark, what's going on? This has to be a misunderstanding, right? I answered coldly, talk to your lawyer. My silence terrified them more, and I felt a quiet satisfaction, not revenge, but justice drawing near. One evening, about 2 weeks after that fateful Christmas night, I had just returned to my rented room after class when the door suddenly burst open. Grant, Susan, and Lucas stood there, looking haggard and frantic, every trace of their former arrogance gone. Grant was gaunt, eyes ringed with dark circles, his suit rumpled. Susan's makeup was smeared, hair disheveled. Lucas was pale as death, clothes unkempt. They pushed inside, shut the door, and Grant spoke with a shaking voice. Mark, we need to talk. They begged for forgiveness, pleaded with me to ask Robert to spare them. Susan sobbed. Mark, I'm sorry. Please don't send us to prison. Lucas stammered. Mark, I know I was wrong. Please ask Mr. Kingsley to let our family live. They dropped to their knees, clutching my hands in desperation. I looked down calmly at the faces that had tormented my childhood. Grant's slaps, Susan's sneers, Lucas's mocking laughter. My heart ached, not from pity but from the flood of memories. I spoke steadily. You have to face the consequences of what you did. Now leave. They wept and begged more, but I opened the door and pushed them out. When it closed, I collapsed onto the bed, breathing hard. That was the last time I saw them before the trial. And in that moment, I realized I had become stronger than ever. The trial unfolded quickly, the evidence undeniable. The Denver courtroom was packed. Relatives, reporters, curious onlookers. Tension filled the air. Whispers spread as Robert's lawyers presented the receipts, transaction records, and my testimony. I took the stand as a witness, recounting every year of exploitation and theft while the room listened in silence. My voice was steady but heavy with emotion. I was made to do all the housework since I was a child, beaten, starved. The money meant for me was spent on them while I had to fend for myself. People listened. Some wiped away tears. Grant stared at me with belated remorse, but I didn't meet his eyes. Every act of embezzlement was laid bare in public. How Grant withdrew the funds after my mother died, spent them on new cars, jewelry, vacations, while I lived in deprivation. Grant sat in the defendant's chair, head bowed, trying to deny it, but his lawyer had no solid defense. The Miller family received the punishment they deserved. The court found Grant Miller guilty of embezzlement of entrusted property and long-term financial abuse of a minor. 12 years in prison, ordered to repay the entire stolen amount plus interest and all assets acquired with illicit funds, including the house, seized. He collapsed in his seat, hands covering his face as the sentence was read. Susan Miller was convicted as an accomplice for concealing the crime and profiting unlawfully. 5 years suspended sentence with probation, ordered to surrender all personal assets derived from the stolen money, the gold jewelry, luxury furniture. She wailed, begging the judge, "I didn't know anything." But the evidence proved she knew and benefited. Lucas Miller was found to have knowingly profited illegally. He was old enough to understand. 3 years suspended sentence, barred from handling finances for 5 years, and ordered to perform community service. He sat frozen, face white, arrogance completely gone. All bank accounts linked to the family were frozen on the spot. Ownership of assets was transferred to compensate me according to the ruling. The judge struck the gavel. The sound rang out like a death sentence for their past. Grant crumbled completely in the defendant's chair. Susan broke into hysterical sobs, clutching Lucas. He sat numb before the irreversible truth. When the trial ended, I walked out of the courthouse alone without looking back, officially closing the final chapter of my life as a Miller. The Denver sun blazed brightly, a cool breeze blew, and I felt truly free. I called Robert. "It's over, Dad. Everything is really over." He replied, "From today, you live for yourself. I'm so proud of you." I smiled faintly. A painful chapter had closed and a new journey had truly begun. 3 years have passed since that fateful Christmas night when I was 20. Time flowed like a calm yet turbulent river, carrying me from Denver to Utah, from a struggling student to a man gradually finding his rightful place. I completed my university degree with Robert's quiet support, regular bank transfers, never ostentatious, just enough so I could focus entirely on my studies without worrying about hunger or rent. On graduation day, I stood on stage accepting my diploma under the blazing summer sun, while friends cheered loudly. Robert sat in the front row, smiling discreetly, but he didn't rush up to hug me like other fathers. Instead, he waited at the exit and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Congratulations, son. Now it's time to come home to me. But not as my son. I want you to join Kingsley Corporation as a regular employee and prove your real worth." His words surprised me, but I nodded. I understood. He wanted me to walk on my own feet, not lean on blood ties or pity. That was his way of raising me, and I accepted the challenge. Right after graduation, I moved to Utah and settled into a modest apartment near headquarters instead of the family's lavish estate. Even with an honors degree in hand, the brutal environment at Kingsley Corporation quickly showed me the vast gulf between textbook theory and real-world business. High-pressure projects, relentless pace, meetings from dawn to dusk, deadlines days apart, and standards so strict that a single mistake could collapse an entire plan. I started as a regular project development officer with a standard entry-level salary and no privileges. The first few months nearly broke me. Sleepless nights analyzing data, running around meeting partners, and facing my first failures. One resort project fell behind schedule because of my miscalculated costs, and my boss tore into me. My heart pounded every time I walked into a meeting. My hands shook when presenting ideas. Catherine, Robert's wife, the platinum blonde, ice-eyed vice chairman, second only to him in power, never hid her contempt. She deliberately gave me near-impossible tasks. Analyze a new market in 48 hours, draft an expansion plan with incomplete data, or throw me into board presentations with no warning. In meetings, she would dismiss my proposals with cold, cutting remarks laced with digs at my origins. Interesting idea, but perhaps it only works for someone lacking real-world experience, probably still adjusting to this scale. Her words sliced like knives, colleagues whispered, and I swallowed my anger to stay silent. Finley, Robert's legitimate son, a few years younger than me and arrogant as a prince, undermined me behind the scenes. As head of marketing, with slicked back hair and a fake smile, he pounced on my smallest mistakes to spread slander, whispering that I was just the bastard they picked up, or circulating internal emails exaggerating my errors. Once he brazenly stole credit for a California resort chain expansion strategy I had slaved over for 3 weeks, poring over every page of data, dissecting every figure until I was exhausted. Yet in the meeting, he stood up and calmly declared, "This plan was my proposal." I sat there stunned, blood rushing to my face, but I chose silence, not a single word of protest. Still, I gritted my teeth and endured everything, never raising my voice, never arguing publicly. I simply observed, learned, and improved myself. While others rested on weekends, I buried myself in the corporate library, devouring documents on project management, finance, and operations. Step by step, I revised plans, won back partners, and countered every scheme with results they could not deny. Project after project, my ability became undeniable. First came small wins, an analysis report that cut operating costs 10% at the Utah resort, earning a nod from my boss. Then bigger ones. My market expansion proposal secured a major partner, boosting quarterly revenue by 20%. Numbers don't lie. Colleagues began seeking my opinion. From being isolated, eating lunch alone, sitting in the corner of the office, I gradually earned the trust of senior management and my direct teams. An older colleague patted my shoulder. "You're doing great, Mark. Don't let Catherine's words get to you." Robert watched silently from a distance, never intervening directly, but I knew he was proud of his son's daily growth. Late-night calls. "I heard about your project. Keep going." When the time was right, after 2 years of proving myself through a string of successful projects, Robert decided to hold an official family introduction, bringing me fully into the light. The gathering of the entire Kingsley clan took place at the main estate, a sprawling mansion with a grand marble hall, glittering crystal chandeliers, and long tables set lavishly. Dozens of relatives assembled, aunts, uncles, cousins, all impeccably dressed, whispering as I entered. I walked in composed and calm in a tailored black suit, hair neatly styled, yet still met with scrutinizing eyes and murmurs about my origins. "That's the illegitimate one. He looks decent. But does he really belong here?" When Robert stood and declared before the entire family, "Today I present Mark, my biological son, with Rose Miller. He will join the line of succession and share responsibilities with Finley." The hall fell silent, then erupted in whispers. Catherine shot to her feet in protest, voice shrill. "Robert, you've lost your mind. This boy is an outsider. Bringing him in will destroy the family order. He has no right to inheritance. Born to a maid, now dreaming of taking everything." Finley also rose, openly mocking, face flushed with rage. "Dad, don't be fooled. Mark just showed up to steal credit and power. He got lucky on a few projects, that's all. I'm the only legitimate son." Their words cut deep. The clan whispered louder, eyes fixed on me with suspicion. I stood there, heart racing, but said nothing, waiting for Robert. Amid the chaos, Robert's voice thundered coldly. "Mark is my lawful heir. Anyone who refuses to accept this decision will be immediately removed from the family and stripped of every cent of inheritance." His words struck like lightning. The hall froze in stunned silence. No one dared oppose him openly again. Catherine collapsed back into her chair, face ashen. Finley went mute, fists clenched. I stood there, cold sweat running down my spine, but strength surged inside me. The introduction ended in heavy silence, yet I knew the real battle had only just begun. Afterward, the jealous faction led by Catherine and Finley secretly conspired to sabotage me behind contracts, projects, and closed-door meetings. They manipulated data in my reports, spread rumors that I climbed by riding my father's name, or deliberately handed me doomed projects so I would take the fall. Once critical information on a major international deal was leaked, and Finley whispered to leadership that I had been careless. I discovered the trap through a hidden email, heart pounding as I read it. But I didn't react impulsively or accuse anyone. Instead, I dismantled each trap step by step, neutralizing every plot with competence and composure. Double-checking data, winning partners back with solid evidence, and presenting clearly in meetings. A project nearly ruined by cost overruns I turned around by renegotiating with suppliers, saving millions. From initial suspicion, family members gradually began to look at me differently, no longer seeing only my origins but my real ability and grit. An elder uncle patted my shoulder. "You've done well, Mark. It's not easy in your position." One successful project followed another. European resort expansions, optimization of domestic hotel chains, generating massive profits. I carved out my own place in the corporation and within the Kingsley family the hardest way possible, by rising on my own, without leaning on Robert, without tricks, only through sweat and intellect. Over those years, I stayed up night after night analyzing data, rushing to meet partners and learning from every small failure. From a newcomer viewed with suspicion, I rose to become Regional Project Development Director, leading my own team and earning praise from senior management. Colleagues began seeking me out. "Mark, what do you think of this plan?" I smiled and answered thoughtfully, but inside I remained wary. I knew Catherine and Finley had never truly accepted me. They had retreated into the shadows, but they hadn't disappeared. And just when I was finally standing firm in the corporation, they launched their final counterattack, like a venomous snake that had been waiting for the perfect moment to strike. It was a massive project, a luxury resort development in Hawaii worth hundreds of millions of dollars, involving international partners and an extremely tight deadline. After my previous successes, I was put in full charge. At first, everything went smoothly. I drew up detailed plans, conducted thorough risk analyses, and negotiated contracts. Then strange things started happening. Cost data was quietly altered. Figures suddenly ballooned, causing delays. Partners called, furious. "Why have costs skyrocketed like this? We won't accept it." I double-checked everything, heart pounding with dread. Someone had tampered with the contract files without notice. At the same time, internal rumors spread. "Mark Kingsley is ruining the big project. Maybe he's not capable after all. He only got here because of his father." Anonymous emails were sent to the board, exaggerating mistakes and placing all blame on me. I sat in my office staring at the screen, cold sweat breaking out. I knew this was no coincidence. Catherine and Finley were behind it, sabotaging the project to destroy me before I became a real threat to Finley's inheritance. Fear surged. After everything I had fought for, could I lose it all now? But I didn't panic. I calmly began gathering evidence, moving silently like a hunter waiting for the prey to reveal itself. An emergency board meeting was called just days later in an atmosphere of extreme tension. The top-floor conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the sunlit sprawl of Salt Lake City felt like it was on fire inside. The entire executive team was present. Robert sat at the head of the table, face grave. Catherine and Finley sat across from me, their eyes gleaming with barely concealed triumph. Catherine opened, voice shrill and aggressive. "The Hawaii project is on the verge of collapse. Costs are out of control. Partners are threatening to walk. Mark, how do you explain this? Or did you think this position was just a game you could play because of family connections?" Finley jumped in, dripping with sarcasm. "Exactly. I warned everyone, Mark is all theory and no substance. Now look, the corporation is losing hundreds of millions because of his incompetence. Dad, you have to step in now." Colleagues whispered, "Low birth yet dreaming of leadership?" The board frowned. I sat there, heart pounding like war drums, blood rushing to my face. This was the climax. If I didn't turn the tide, 3 years of effort would crumble. I didn't make long excuses, didn't shout or cry. Instead, I stood calmly, voice steady and sharp. "I have proof that someone deliberately sabotaged the contract." I connected my laptop to the projector and displayed everything. Covert emails from Catherine to a trusted subordinate instructing them to adjust the data to test Mark's competence. Timestamps of contract edits matching Finley's system logins. Internal messages where he directed others to blame Mark if the project fails. Everything pointed unmistakably at Catherine and Finley. Timestamps, digital signatures, undeniable. The room went dead silent as the evidence appeared on the giant screen, each line cutting like a blade. The truth was laid bare right there in the boardroom. Catherine froze, her face turning paper white, fists clenched. Finley went pale, mouth agape, unable to speak. The attacks they had just hurled instantly boomeranged onto themselves. Colleagues whispered in shock. I can't believe it was actually them sabotaging everything. The board looked at them with contempt. For the first time, Robert slammed his fist on the table. The sound thundered through the room. Rage turned his face crimson. He turned directly to Catherine and Finley, voice a low growl. "Explain every single thing right now in front of me. You dared manipulate a project and frame my son? Did you think I was blind?" The room fell deathly silent, the air suffocating. At first, Catherine tried to deny it, voice trembling. "Robert, you've misunderstood. Finley and I were just testing Mark's ability." Finley shouted, accusing me of fabrication. "He made it all up. Those emails are forged." But as I tossed printed copies onto the table, timestamps, signatures, access logs, they gradually fell silent, unable to refute a single thing. Catherine bowed her head, tears streaming down. Finley collapsed into his chair, face ghost white. Robert, furious, declared he would strip both mother and son of all authority in the corporation as punishment for their long deception. "As of today, you are both relieved of your positions. I will remove you from the board and from inheritance rights if necessary." At that peak of tension, I stepped forward and stopped him, voice calm but resolute. "Dad, stop. I exposed everything not to destroy them, but so you would know the full truth and put an end to the schemes in the dark. Give them a chance to make amends." Robert stared at me, stunned, anger giving way to surprise, then deep admiration. Catherine and Finley were equally speechless at my decision, mouths open in disbelief. The room fell completely silent. Everyone looked at me as if I had just done the unthinkable. The meeting ended in heavy silence. From that moment on, all of Catherine's and Finley's authority was placed under Robert's strict oversight. She lost the right to sign major contracts. He was demoted to a minor role. Their status in the family was no longer what it once was. They remained, but like shadows, never again daring to hold their heads high. A few days later, Catherine and Finley came to my private office on their own, late afternoon as the sun set blood-red through the windows. They entered looking exhausted and terrified of losing everything. Catherine's eyes ringed with dark circles, no makeup, voice hoarse. Finley kept his head down, arrogance gone, only trembling remained. "Mark, we came to apologize," Catherine said, voice shaking. For the first time, they bowed their heads and apologized for everything they had done. Catherine confessed, "I was afraid of losing my position, afraid Finley would lose his future. I was wrong. I treated you terribly from the very first day. Please forgive me." Finley stammered, "Brother, I was jealous of you. I sabotaged you, stole your credit, spread rumors. Please forgive me." I looked at them for a long time, memories flooding back. The humiliation in the lobby, the impossible tasks, the secret plots. My heart ached, but no longer with anger. Finally, I said I would never forget what I had endured, but I chose to end it here so everyone could have a chance to make things right. "I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I no longer want to live with hatred. Fix your mistakes and never repeat them." Catherine broke down sobbing, tears rolling down her cheeks, voice choked. "Thank you. You are far more generous than I ever imagined." Finley stood frozen, eyes red, whispering, "From now on, I'll call you brother, and I mean it with all my heart." For the first time, they realized they hadn't lost to power but to conscience. Defeated by a forgiveness they themselves had never possessed. They left looking lighter, and from that day forward, everything changed. After that, Catherine and Finley withdrew from all underhanded fighting. She began sincerely supporting my projects. He started learning from me instead of sabotaging me. The corporation grew calmer, and I continued my path, not through hatred, but through the choice to forgive once the truth had been reclaimed. In the years that followed, I grew step by step within the corporation through my own abilities. Every project I led delivered clear results, from expanding the resort chain across Asia, where I successfully negotiated with local partners to cut construction costs by 20%, to optimizing the domestic hotel management system, pushing quarterly revenue to record highs. Robert gradually entrusted me with greater responsibilities, no longer supporting me quietly from behind, but openly placing absolute trust in his son. He would call me into his private office and hand me thick stacks of documents. "My son, this project is yours. I know you'll do it well." Those words warmed my heart, not because of the power, but because they were recognition from the father I had once only dreamed of. Catherine and Finley truly turned over a new leaf. The rivalry and jealousy were gone. They used their experience and resources to help me run the corporation, seeing it as their way of atoning for past mistakes. Catherine, who once coldly dismissed my ideas, now sent supportive emails. "Mark, regarding the Hawaii plan, I have some old contacts who can help. Call me if you need anything." She even joined my meetings, offering sharp advice drawn from decades of experience. Finley changed most dramatically. The former saboteur began coming to my office to ask, "Brother, I don't understand this analysis. Can you explain it to me?" At first I was wary, suspecting another trick, but gradually I saw his sincerity. He genuinely wanted to make amends and prove himself without fighting for dominance. We started working together on a major European market expansion project. For the first time, in front of the entire board, he openly declared, "The core concept was Mark's idea." I froze for a second, still guarded, unsure whether it was true goodwill or another trap. But over time, the suspicion melted away, and our joint sessions became real collaboration. The Kingsley family, once torn by scheming and division, began to heal because of these changes. The journey, from that Christmas night at age 20 when I was thrown a crumpled $1 bill, a moment of humiliation that still lingers like a scar. The confrontation with my stepfather Grant in front of the relatives' banquet table. The fateful meeting with my real father Robert in the headquarters lobby. The long months of struggle within the family against Catherine and Finley. All of it now closes in a long, winding recollection. Yet today, at 28, as Regional Project Development Director of the Kingsley Corporation, I realize those memories no longer stab my heart. They have become milestones of a road already traveled. They are lessons about the power of resilience, the value of justice, and the human capacity for change. I no longer feel anger when I think of Grant or Catherine. Instead, I am grateful, because they forged me into the man I am now. I gently push the old memories aside, tidy the papers on my desk, project reports, newly signed contracts, and a small family photo Robert gave me, and leave the office earlier than usual to go home for Christmas with my family. I drive toward the Kingsley estate on the outskirts of the city. The familiar road is lined with pure white snow. Cold wind lashes the windows, yet warmth fills my chest. I think of Christmases past, sitting alone in the corner of the Miller table, watching them laugh while my heart ached, and compare them to now. The difference makes me smile to myself, hands tightening on the steering wheel. When I arrive, the entire Kingsley family is already waiting. The mansion glows with light and laughter. The vast estate, its gardens blanketed in snow, holds a towering Christmas tree that touches the ceiling in the grand living room. The long banquet table is elegantly set, fragrant roast turkey, pudding, glasses of deep red wine gleaming under the chandeliers. The scent of cinnamon and fresh pine fills the air, mingling with cheerful Christmas music. Robert stands at the door like a true father welcoming his son home. He opens his arms and hugs me tightly, voice warm and low. "You're home. I've been waiting for you." Catherine smiles from a distance and nods. "Merry Christmas, Mark." Finley claps me on the shoulder. "Brother, let's open presents together this year." Relatives gather around, voices lively. Aunts and uncles asking about my latest projects. Cousins raising glasses in toast. No more suspicious glances, only genuine warmth. In that moment, I suddenly realize I am no longer the child standing on the sidelines of a banquet table. I truly have a family to come home to. This is not where I was born, but it is where I am acknowledged, protected, and loved unconditionally. Looking at everyone gathered around the Christmas table, I quietly reflect on my entire life's journey. From the boy abandoned after his mother's death, to the 18-year-old searching for truth in confusion, to the 20-year-old on Christmas night having a dollar bill thrown in his face, then the months of confrontation, struggle, and the trial that exposed the past. All those memories flood back, no longer painful, only serene. I realize I have changed, from a resigned child into a man who stands tall, through my own inner strength, through forgiveness, and through the belated love of a father. I understand that the past cannot be erased, but we can choose how to move forward. Hatred once gave me the power to rise from the ashes of the Miller house, to face Grant and demand justice. But forgiveness is what finally set me free. Free to love, to build, to live without the ghosts of the past haunting me. I watch Catherine laughing with the grandchildren, Finley helping Robert pour wine, and I think, if I had not forgiven, we would all still be trapped in an endless cycle of resentment. I realize that true family is not where you are born, neither the fake blood ties of the Millers nor the initial power struggles of the Kingsleys, but where you are accepted, protected, and welcomed home. That place can be a grand mansion or a cramped rented room as long as there are people who truly care. That Christmas was the first in my life that felt complete. No contemptuous stares, no cold banquet table, no humiliating dollar bill from years ago. Only warm lights, peaceful laughter, and arms genuinely open to welcome me home. After all the loss and struggle, I had finally stepped out of the darkness and into the light of a real family. We gathered around the tree, opening gifts. Robert gave me a watch engraved with my name, Catherine a business book, Finley tickets to a game, and laughed late into the night. I stepped out onto the balcony watching the snow fall gently and thought of my mother. "Mom, I've found the home that was truly meant for me, the place where they open their arms and accept me." My story ends there, as a reminder. Never let your origins decide your destiny. I rose from an outcast to a leader. Never let hatred guide your entire life. Forgiveness set me free. And never ever give up on yourself, no matter how many times the world turns its back. Because one day you will find your own light.